On a cold winter night in October 1989, 11-year-old Jacob Wetterling was abducted on his way home in the small, low-crime town of St. Joseph, and he never returned. For 27 years, thousands of questions haunted many people, especially Jacob's parents, who never stopped searching for their son who had vanished without a trace after being taken by an unknown man. But after 27 years, the search finally ended, with an outcome that was both shocking and tragic. The tragedy began on the 22nd of October 1989. That night was just another ordinary winter evening in the peaceful town of St. Joseph, a small, quiet town in Minnesota. Jacob's parents had gone to a dinner party at a friend's house, about 25 minutes away from home. They planned to return around midnight and had reminded their children to stay inside while they were gone. But later, Trevor, Jacob's older brother, called their parents to ask his mother if he, Jacob, and Jacob's best friend, Aaron Larson, could go to a nearby store to rent a film. Their mother, Patty, refused the request. Her reason was that the store was quite far from their home, and the road leading there passed through farmland with only a few houses along the way. She was worried something bad might happen. Besides, it was already very late, and if anything did happen, it would be difficult to get help. However, the three boys kept begging and managed to convince Patty and Jerry, Jacob and Trevor's parents, to let them go to the store. They promised they would come straight home after getting what they wanted. To reassure their parents even more, Trevor said they would bring a flashlight to avoid any traffic accidents while cycling, believing that St. Joseph was a relatively safe area. Jerry and Patty finally agreed, thinking there was little chance that anything bad could happen to their children. Unfortunately, they were wrong. Just 45 minutes after granting permission, the phone rang again. This time it was from a neighbor, urging Jerry and Patty to come home immediately because Jacob had been abducted. Now let's go back a few minutes earlier. The three boys were on their way home by bicycle after renting a film from the store. As they passed through the fields, Aaron suddenly heard a gunshot from the side of the road. Then, out of nowhere, a gun appeared, startling him. Moments later, a man wearing a mask emerged, pointing the gun at the boys. He threatened them and ordered all three to get off their bikes and lie down in a ditch by the field. At first, Jacob, Trevor, and Aaron thought the man was just a high school kid playing a prank. But it didn't take long for them to realize that he was a real criminal. The man shouted that he would shoot them all if they didn't lie, face down on the grass, and turn off their flashlight. Terrified and helpless, the boys did as they were told. The man then demanded that they show their faces and tell him their ages. After that, he ordered Trevor to run as fast as he could toward the woods, or he would shoot. 10 seconds later, Aaron was told to do the same. Both boys ran as fast as they could, afraid of being shot. But after a short while, they turned back, hoping to see Jacob running behind them. He never appeared. Jacob had vanished, taken away by the masked man. Panicked and trembling, Trevor and Aaron rushed toward the nearest houses to find help. They had no idea what would happen to Jacob. Meanwhile, Jacob was forced into a car and driven away. He was never seen again. Not long after, Jacob and Trevor's parents received the terrifying call. They raced home as fast as they could. When they arrived, the first thing they saw was Trevor and Aaron, both in shock, frightened, and completely shaken. Understandably so. They had just witnessed something horrific, the abduction of someone they loved dearly. Police soon arrived and began questioning the boys to learn more about the kidnapper's appearance, hoping to find any lead that could help catch him. Trevor described the man as short and heavy-set, but said he couldn't identify his face because it was covered by a black nylon mask. Aaron, who was the last to see Jacob, tried his best to give more detailed information based on what he could remember. Jacob's disappearance quickly drew massive public attention. A large-scale search operation was launched, one of the biggest missing person investigations in United States history. Thousands of volunteers and law enforcement officers joined efforts to find him. Posters with Jacob's picture were distributed nationwide, and people across America felt deep sympathy for the family, doing whatever they could to help. But as time went by, months turned into years, Jacob was still nowhere to be found. His abduction became one of the most haunting mysteries in St. Joseph, and even across the country. Where did Jacob go? Who was his kidnapper? Those two questions remained unanswered. Despite ongoing investigations, there were no solid leads that could point to the perpetrator, just as the last glimmer of hope was fading. A 12-year-old boy named Jared came forward with his testimony. He too had been kidnapped and endured a terrifying ordeal months before Jacob disappeared. Jared lived in Cold Spring, Minnesota, only about 10 miles from the Wetterling family home. On January 13, 1989, roughly 9 months before Jacob's abduction, during another cold winter night, Jared had just finished ice skating with friends and went to a cafe. When it was time to go home, he asked one of his friends, Corey, to walk with him, but Corey refused. So Jared went home alone. When Jared didn't return within an hour, though the cafe was only about a short walk from home, his parents grew worried and began searching for him. 2 hours later, Jared suddenly burst through the door, terrified and shaken. His parents noticed the fear on his face. When they asked what happened, Jared said he had been attacked and that the man who did it was still outside. His parents immediately called the police, who then interviewed Jared, forcing the poor boy to relive his traumatic experience. But Jared didn't complain. He wanted to help catch the man who had hurt him. He recounted everything from the moment he left his friends around 9 p.m. A car had pulled up beside him, and the driver asked for directions. When Jared responded, the man stepped out, pulled a gun, and forced Jared into the car. Thinking fast, Jared paid close attention to every detail inside the car, anything that could later help the police identify it. He noticed a police scanner on the dashboard. The man then ordered him to pull his hat over his eyes and lie down in the back seat. Jared obeyed, but still tried to memorize every turn, every sound, and every bump on the road. After about 15 minutes, the car turned onto a gravel road and stopped. The man then assaulted Jared in a horrifying sexual attack. Terrified, Jared thought he was going to be killed, but to his surprise, the man later drove him back to Cold Spring. He returned Jared's winter jacket, but kept his other clothes. Before releasing him, the man warned Jared that if he ever told anyone about him, he would be killed. He then ordered Jared to run and not look back, or he would shoot. Jared ran as fast as he could, straight home. Later, he told the police everything he could remember. Every sound, every object, every detail of the car, including the police scanner. Jared hoped that his information could help catch the man before he hurt anyone else. The following day, police followed up on his account and identified several potential suspects. One of them was Danny Heinrich, a former member of the National Guard. Heinrich had a history of legal trouble, including robbery and several DWI, driving while intoxicated, violations, meaning he had been caught driving under the influence of alcohol or drugs. When police searched his car, they found a police scanner, just as Jared had described. Jared later identified 2 men who resembled his attacker, one of them being Heinrich. However, since he couldn't narrow it down to a single suspect, the police didn't have enough evidence to press charges. Jared went home frightened, knowing that the man who had hurt him might still be out there. He was so terrified that he slept in his parents' room for nearly a year. When Jared heard about Jacob's abduction and noticed the similarities between the 2 cases, he began to wonder if it was the same man, and he was determined to do whatever he could to help. On December 13, 1989, nearly 2 months after Jacob disappeared, Jared worked with FBI agents to create a composite sketch of his attacker. The drawing bore a striking resemblance to Danny Heinrich. 3 days later, the FBI brought Heinrich in for questioning. Investigators asked where he had been on the nights of both Jared's and Jacob's abductions. Heinrich had no solid alibi, and he eventually agreed to let the FBI collect his shoes, hair samples, and car tires. Footprints and tire tracks found at Jacob's abduction site matched Heinrich's. That was enough for police to obtain a search warrant for his home. Inside, they found a police radio scanner, black boots, camouflage trousers, and even photos of young boys. Strangely, the investigators let him keep the photos and left. Then, on February 9, 1990, nearly a year after Jared's attack, FBI lab results confirmed that fibers from Jared's jacket matched fibers from Heinrich's car. Heinrich was arrested and charged with the kidnapping and sexual assault of Jared. The FBI profilers assisted with the interrogation. They even filled a folder with papers and wrote Heinrich's name on the cover, trying to intimidate him, making it look like they had a mountain of evidence when in reality, they desperately needed a confession from Heinrich. The officers held Heinrich overnight in jail, but the man kept denying all the accusations. The district attorney decided they didn't have enough evidence to charge him with any crime, and Heinrich had to be released. That's how the law works in the United States. No matter how strong the suspicion, without solid evidence to justify it, no one has the right to be detained or arrested. Meanwhile, Jacob's family, still hoping for his return, refused to give up on finding him. The local police also continued searching for new evidence or clues that might lead them to Jacob. At the same time, Jarrett was under immense pressure from himself. He desperately wanted to find Jacob and expose the criminal who had also caused him trauma. The police kept questioning and interviewing him, often pulling him out of class for follow-up sessions. His identity as a victim, which should have been kept confidential, quickly spread. Jarrett's life was never the same after that. He was constantly pressured to answer all kinds of questions from investigators and to clearly identify the perpetrator, even though they likely knew Jarrett didn't truly know. Seeing the toll it took on him, Jarrett's parents finally decided to move away from Cospring, to start a new life and help him live a normal childhood again. Years after the attack, Jared's family moved about 20 miles away to a small town called Paynesville, Minnesota. Decades passed. Then, in 2013, a local blogger named Joy Baker decided to write a new article about the Jacob Wetterling case. While digging through old reports, she came across Jared's name and reached out to him. Together, they began researching deeper and discovered a shocking connection. Joy found old newspaper articles about a series of child abductions and assaults that had occurred in Paynesville, the same area Jared had moved to back in 1986, 3 years before Jared's own attack and Jacob's disappearance. Strangely, these incidents were not isolated. Several boys had reported being approached or assaulted by a man while walking or biking alone. The man would ask their age, assault them, and then let them go. Local police had never caught the offender or identified who he was. Joy and Jared both began to suspect that these older cases were linked to both Jared's and Jacob's abductions. When they presented this to investigators, even the FBI was shocked by the pattern. Realizing that he wasn't the only survivor, Jared began his own investigation. Determined to find justice for Jacob and other victims, he and Joy met with several of the boys who had survived the earlier attacks and collected their testimonies. This led authorities to reopen the case and re-examine DNA evidence, specifically a hair sample from the original Paynesville suspect, who happened to be Danny Heinrich. With modern forensic technology, investigators were able to compare DNA from Jared's jacket on the night of his assault with DNA from Heinrich's hair sample, and the results matched perfectly. Finally, after decades, there was solid proof that Heinrich was the man who had attacked Jared. However, there was a heartbreaking legal obstacle: the statute of limitations. Because the case was too old, the law no longer allowed prosecutors to charge Heinrich for Jared's kidnapping and assault, even though his guilt was now proven. Still, Jared's persistence brought long-awaited answers to many families and victims who had suffered in silence for years. His courage helped reveal the truth, and because Jared's case showed clear connections to Jacob's disappearance, investigators obtained another search warrant for Heinrich's home. Unfortunately, they didn't find any direct evidence linking him to Jacob's abduction or the earlier Paynesville assaults. What they did find, however, was alarming. Heinrich possessed child pornography materials, which were illegal. On July 28, 2015, Heinrich was arrested and charged with child pornography offenses. Investigators strongly believed he was also responsible for Jacob's abduction, but they still lacked physical evidence to prove it in court. Faced with this impasse, authorities made Heinrich a shocking offer: a plea deal. If he revealed where Jacob was and told the truth about what happened, prosecutors would drop all other charges except one: possession of child pornography. After consulting Jacob's parents, Patty and Jerry Wetterling, they reluctantly agreed. They just wanted to know the truth, to finally bring their son home. Heinrich accepted the deal. During court, it took only 10 minutes for the truth to come out. When the prosecutor asked if he had kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and killed Jacob Wetterling, Heinrich calmly replied, "Yes, that's true." He then described what happened that terrible night. After taking Jacob in his car and assaulting him, Heinrich panicked when he thought he saw a police patrol nearby. In his panic, he shot Jacob, something he claimed he never intended to do. He had planned to let him go. Heinrich also admitted to the kidnapping and assault of Jared Shirel. Following the confession, Heinrich led investigators to a rural site near Painesville, where he had buried Jacob's remains. Despite his confession to the abduction, assault, and murder, the plea deal stood. Heinrich was not charged for those crimes. He was sentenced only for possession of child pornography, receiving a 20-year prison sentence. Born on February 14, 1963 in Cold Spring, Minnesota, little is known about Heinrich's personal life or background. Information about his family and upbringing remains scarce, leaving many to wonder what drove him to become a predator. When released, he will be in his 70s. For Jacob's family, the truth brought both relief and heartbreak. After nearly 30 years of searching and hoping, they finally learned what had happened. But it was not the ending they had prayed for. In Jacob's memory, his parents founded the Jacob Wetterling Foundation, now known as the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, dedicated to helping families of missing children. The Wetterling family also advocated for the Jacob Wetterling Crimes Against Children Act, a landmark U.S. law that requires every state to maintain a registry of sex offenders. Jacob's mother, Patty Wetterling, went on to become the chair of the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and today she remains a well-known child safety advocate, dedicating her life to protecting children so that no other family must endure the pain hers did.